Hello, my emetophobics, and welcome to, oh Christ, why is this even welcome to the next installment of My Emetophobia Story. The plane landed and I was so thankful to be out, but it wasn't over yet. I was now running on no food, no water, sleep deprivation, and 12 hours of unrelenting anxiety. What I didn't realise was that we now had to get through American passport control, and my brain was weak as all hell and ready to explode. Right here was where I found the tipping point. As we walked up to get into the passport line, two things happened. I saw that someone had been sick on the floor, and I heard a young child in the loo as we were passing, sobbing and screaming, sounding terrified. There was something about the crying, though, that distressed me. I knew that cry. I had experienced that cry. That was the cry of a terrified child that had been sick. I mean, it might not have been. The child was sobbing in a different dialect, so I couldn't be sure. But I recognised the sound with such absolution that in that moment, my brain was automatically triggered and decided to connect my own childhood experience to what I was hearing. Suddenly, my brain began projecting disturbing memories of me as a child, sobbing, terrified, crying that I didn't want to be sick. That was it. I went into meltdown. We were stood in a huge, never-ending, super slow passport line, people bunched up all around us, sweating with no air conditioning, no natural light. And there I was, hyperventilating, groaning, shaking convulsively, squeezing my dad's arm, digging my fingernails into my skin, barely able to move in absolute painful terror, and having a complete and utter meltdown as my brain replayed the most distressing memories and screamed that I was going to be sick. If I'd been able to leave the situation, I could have calmed down, but that wasn't possible. If I'd left, we would have lost our place, and the waiting time would be longer. Trying to calm me down, my mum put her Fitbit watch on my wrist and set it to relax. That particular setting registers your heart rate and gets you to calm down by showing you a circle getting bigger and smaller. You breathe in as the circle gets bigger, and you breathe out as the circle gets smaller. It was working, but it took a good couple of repeats, as every time it ended, my anxiety pinged back. Finally, I calmed down enough to stop the panic, but my anxiety was still high and easily triggered. If I was going to survive the rest of the queue, I had to do something. Once I was able to move from my terror-frozen state, I got my phone out and played clips of The Simpsons on YouTube to distract myself, whilst very slowly feeding myself teeny bits of water and a nut bar. We were in that queue for 2.5 hours, but we made it and finally got out of the airport. Bloody hell. Anyway, I actually ended up being alright with the jet lag, getting enough sleep every night. But because that experience had been so goddamn traumatic, again, my brain had been kicked back to square one. I'd have to gradually expose myself once again. The only problem here was that I was in a different country. Everything was new and we were doing new things every day. Why was this a problem? Because when you're gradually exposing yourself, the first time you do something, it's terrifying. But you do the same thing again and again until it's not scary anymore. I wasn't able to do that. Everything we did was for the first time, and so everything we did was terrifying. I was immediately exposing myself to lots of new things, rather than gradually working on them. This meant that days where I should have been enjoying myself, enjoying the sights, were spent with all-day anxiety that didn't stop until we returned home. Some things I even had to miss out on, because I was too exhausted to fight my brain anymore that day. It's not all doom and gloom though. I did manage to have some really good times when I was able to distract myself enough, and I will cherish those memories. Side note, American donuts are amazing. Oh my god, bear claws. Think it's over? Think again, my friends. It gets worse. 2 weeks passed and we prepared to fly back home. The last airport experience I'd had was a nightmare, so naturally, my brain fed on that, and it meant that getting back through American customs was full of insane anxiety, and I had to hold my mum's hand for a bunch of it, but I made it. Then, the second flight began. When we finally got out of customs and into the plane, my anxiety dropped and I felt a sense of relief. I was ready to chill for the next 12 hours and watch films. I restricted anything that would cause anxiety and decided that I wouldn't eat or drink and only watch funny animations. As long as I got back in one piece without another meltdown, I did not care. Oh boy, was I about to have some fun. I'm going to explain what happened next in as little detail as possible. Basically, the literal second that we got up into the air, a woman in the seat directly behind me began violently being sick. One of my fears of being on a plane is having someone being sick and not being able to escape this. I thought she might stop, so I tried to hang in there. but she didn't. And my brain, once again, went into meltdown. I grabbed my headphones with shaking hands to try and block her out, but I wasn't quick enough, and instead, I froze up and ended up plugging my ears with my fingers, squeezing my eyes shut and shaking my head convulsively as I moaned, trying to block out the sound in absolute terror. It was terrifying because not only did I not like the sound, but my brain was also showing me images of me being sick, the people next to me being sick, the entire cabin being sick, and me not being able to run out and escape it. It wasn't that bad, of course, but my brain was making out that this was going to happen, and that was more terrifying than anything. I felt a tap on my arm and saw that my mum had been able to have us move to the back of the cabin. I could still hear the woman from where we were, but it wasn't right in my ear, and I was able to block it out once I managed to get the headphones on my head. It felt like the moment lasted for hours, but it might have only been half an hour, 40 minutes maybe. It later turned out that the poor woman had been seriously ill and had to be taken out of the plane by medics. The rest of the journey went by peacefully, and we landed in England in one piece. Think it's over? Think again, my friends! I was so glad to get back to the things I recognised as safe, and my anxiety dropped as soon as we got home. I had one free day to acclimatise before going back to work, which was spent relaxing. I found out that coming back from America, the jet lag was worse. So that was fun, and meant that I was only getting about 4 hours sleep a night. The morning I was due to go back to work, it was a beautiful day, and I was running on not much sleep, and I didn't have time for breakfast. But my boyfriend was going to walk me into work, so I was looking forward to that. Now, I haven't experienced anything like this since, but I put it down to not much sleep, no food, and a very tender brain. We left the house, and completely unexpectedly, a tidal wave hit me. We had literally walked 5 minutes down the road, and it was like a switch had been tripped. Completely out of nowhere, my brain attacked me. It was like a tidal wave of terrifying screams and mental images all at once, and immediately I had a complete meltdown right in the street. I didn't know what to do. Hyperventilating, frozen to the spot, but my arms flying about. My boyfriend didn't know what to do either and decided on holding me as I sobbed and hit and pulled violently at his shirt. At this point, I had literally no control over my movements. They were compulsive reactions to the terrifying images that were being shoved into my brain. After America, my mum had given me her Fitbit, and so I managed to hit the relax setting and took deep breaths until I eventually calmed down. We slowly walked back to the house, and I notified my work that I wouldn't be coming in. I did have another panic attack as soon as we got through the door, but I managed to plug my hypnosis in and got myself to calm down enough to sleep. I slept for a few more hours and felt better when I woke up, and spent the rest of the day relaxing and trying to eat. Again, with this panic attack, my brain had been kicked back to square one. My eating had gradually been becoming a problem once more, and I realised that I'd need to start taking domperidone again, as this had massively helped me during my first breakdown. This time, I pulled out all the stops and went back to the doctor. She was very helpful and prescribed me the domperidone, which really helped with getting my eating back on track. On top of that, I absolutely needed therapy again, so I looked into something called EMDR therapy. Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. CBT had been brilliant at the time, but this was clearly a more deep-rooted issue, and I wanted something that was going to outright get to the root of the problem and stop my emetophobia. The way that EMDR works is by going back into particular memories that were traumatizing and taking the fear or anxiety out of them. Then, because that memory no longer produces fear, it doesn't affect you in the present. I would honestly recommend this therapy. It takes guts to do, as you have to revisit and re-experience unwanted memories, but the outcome is just fantastic. Over the first few sessions, I simply talked with a therapist, going back over my life and worst emetophobic moments. She was looking for precise memories that we could target. Once we had found the most traumatizing memories, we began the EMDR. We would sit opposite each other, half a meter apart, and she would ask me to close my eyes, put myself in my worst memory, and re-experience it. Obviously, doing this was stressful and scary. Then, when I indicated that I had put myself into it, she told me to open my eyes, and she then moved 2 fingers back and forth in the air, and I had to follow them with my eyes. This is going to sound highly unbelievable if you haven't experienced it for yourself, but as my eyes went back and forth, I felt the fear from that memory literally melt away from my brain, like it didn't matter anymore. She'd then asked me what thoughts came up at that moment. I'd listen to my brain for a second, and then say something like, "I'm scared." Again, my eyes would follow her fingers and the fear would fade more. Then, because the fear was fading, I'd say, "Actually, it's not that scary." She was literally shaking up my brain and changing the way I saw my own memories. Unlike CBT, where I had to gradually work up to things over months, EMDR was making my brain change right in that moment. As the session went on, my thoughts would bounce about, revealing more from that moment, linking it to present moments, revealing things I had never considered. I'd say, my mum's panicking and it's making me scared. It's making me worse. The therapist would wave her fingers, something would change in my brain. I'd see it from a different angle and say, she's just worried for her child. She's doing her best in this situation. I am thankful to her. With the combination of the domperidone and weekly EMDR sessions, things started to look up. I found that it wasn't just a one-session memory fix with the EMDR, as it can be for some. Because I'd had this phobia for so long, there were many traumatic memories that we had to delve into, and so we had to slowly chip away at my brain to find the source. But my life was starting to get back on track. I was managing to walk back from work some days, instead of taking the bus. I was able to go out and do things and start living my life again. But then... cliffhanger! Dun dun dun! Check out episode 6, where I go into the effects of EMDR and how I try to keep my life on track.